Good morning, everybody. I'm John Casper with the Oshkosh Chamber, and welcome to our program this morning. We are videoing this and recording it, so we'll have it up online later. So anybody wants to go back to check it out again, and I'm sure you will. You can do that. Today we have AJ Armstrong with the Venture Project, and I'll have him introduce himself. He's got an interesting background before if he wants to share some of that. It's pretty cool. But he's the founder of the Venture Project in downtown Oshkosh, co-work space, and on North Main Street in the 200 block. We were just chatting before. We had a AM Oshkosh there last month. Had a great turnout, and I think people are really impressed with what's happening over there. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to AJ, and you can take it from there.
Great. Well, thanks a lot, John, for letting me speak to everybody today. And I'm glad anybody that was able to make it out here to listen to the presentation. I hope this will have some benefit for you all. Apologize for the video. I don't know. You're going to have to just stare at that one shot of me smiling into the sunset right there for the rest of this. But we got a pretty interesting presentation, something I'm pretty passionate about and I think works pretty well. And that's this idea of personal branding. And I'm going to jump in. As John mentioned, I'm the owner of the Venture Project, and my wife, Marissa Armstrong, owns Marissa's Fit Boutique. So with a little bit of my background, I guess, let's see, there we go. So in 2015, I was a graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point. So what I ended up doing was I had commissioned into the Army with a degree in systems engineering, but as an officer, a second lieutenant in the Patriot Missiles. So I went to 11th Brigade, 80A Brigade down in Fort Bliss, Texas, where I took my first unit. About 18 months into my service, I had an old football injury. I was recruited to play football at the academy, and it turned into degenerative osteoarthritis. So I had a medical discharge, an honorable discharge, where I ended up leaving the service. And that was a really interesting time in my life where I had to kind of pivot and figure out what I was going to do. Like I was talking with John a little bit. I grew up in Neenah, so I wanted to see if I could find my way back to the Valley, get my feet underneath me. Took a job with Oshkosh Corporation. It was an awesome opportunity. Over my tenure, I actually just left Oshkosh back in January. And it was a great opportunity. One of my, I guess, more notable contributions was on the new postal truck. I was part of that proposal team, one of the kind of the small group, and I led the entire ILS group on some of those decisions made on the postal truck. So I've kind of got a unique background in systems engineering that mixes in a lot of it with conceptual marketing work. So I've taken that as kind of a freelance gig with Armstrong Ventures, where I'd walk and I'd speak at places and I'd work with individuals on personal brands. I'd work with them in concept or idea phases of their business and figure out ways where the business can also fit their personality. And that's where I found a really nice sweet spot working with entrepreneurs and small business owners. Started doing that in about 2018 while I was working full-time with Truck. And then my wife started Marissa's Fit Boutique, which kind of gave us a little, baptism into the entrepreneurial field. We invested a couple of rental properties, and here in 2021, we launched the Venture Project, which is a business incubator and co-working space in Oshkosh, 210 North Main Street. We just opened in March. We had a soft opening in February, and we did a big grand opening with the chamber, and it was awesome. I was just telling John, we went through 120 cups of coffee that day. So we had a pretty good turnout, I would say, with our grand opening. But the Venture Project is a great way to connect, these different resources in the area together, whether it's conceptual marketing work, systems engineering work, or other ideas where people have business ideas and they're looking for a cheap, cost-effective workplace. So that's kind of the rundown till today. But one of the things that helped a lot with, me growing my personal brand was, me growing some of these different businesses in various ways was the idea of starting a personal brand. So I'm just going to define it for everybody really quick so we're all on the same page. I think most people are kind of aware with the classic definition of what a brand is in marketing. The brand is ultimately a business reputation. So you think of Coca-Cola, you think of chapstick, you think of Kleenex. Well, what's interesting about all of those is in the South, they call soda Coke, any kind of soda or pop. If you're from the UP, they call that Coke. So what Coke has done is figured out a way to kind of infiltrate language and expand their brand. The chapstick is the same way. That's really called lip balm, but everybody sees a lip balm, they call it chapstick because they've expanded their brand. The same with tissues. Kleenex has now kind of expanded and become a well-known household name, which is a great example of branding. Now, what's been kind of, I guess, newer to people in just common people, not really celebrities, is the idea of having a personal brand. So the personal brand is your unique personality and skills and experiences, or your KSAs, your knowledge, skills, attributes that eventually form a business reputation, but within your person. So Gary Vee quotes it up here: your personal brand's your reputation in perpetuity or in perpetuity is the foundation of your career. And this is going to apply to someone that I believe, is looking for a career for employment, or they're an entrepreneur, or they're looking to grow their business. I think it's just something that's really a force multiplier in a lot of ways for an individual. So these are some examples that you guys probably know of. Gary Vaynerchuk, if you're under the age of 40, you've probably heard this guy. He is really a social media savant in a lot of ways, knows so much about the trends and the topics, and has built a massive following by just being himself in a lot of ways, offering valuable advice on the internet to see how you can market and brand in the new technology that's emerging. So very popular thinker. Has several different books out there that you can pick up, and I encourage you to take a look at if you're interested in diving a little deeper into personal branding. Another one, Elon Musk, pretty popular name. You guys probably recognize him, but a lot of, right when you hear Elon Musk's name, right away you think Tesla, you think going to Mars with SpaceX. That his business and his name is one and the same. You see Bill Nye. It's hard to say Bill Nye's name without saying Bill Nye the Science Guy, and then Bill. Like the song from anybody that's 90s baby knows Bill Nye the Science Guy is probably how they learn most of their chemistry. And it's once again, he has been able to launch businesses off of his name. Tony Robbins, another popular consultant in the industry, motivational speaker that is kind of a household name in the space. Shaun White, known for snowboarding, also known for skateboarding, Olympic athlete, also businessman. And Martha Stewart, who famously and infamously, was able to use her name in her business. So these people are they're not quite celebrities. They weren't really made by doing, the kind of the Hollywood show business work, but more or less they took their business and they built it with their name, and it's kind of provided this personal brand for them. So there's some popular examples. This is, I guess, down to earth how I've benefited from it. So you've got my Instagram account. I've got a following about 10,500 people. LinkedIn, these are a little outdated. I think there's probably more or less. I'm not sure what they are now, but LinkedIn, we've got a pretty good following. Facebook, my number one fan, obviously right here. This is Rosemary Murray, my mother-in-law. She likes everything I have on Facebook. But in 2018, when I decided I was going to launch the Armstrong Ventures kind of consulting business, I wanted to make sure that there was a way where I could show value before, I worked with people, because who am I? I'm just this young kid that, who's going to want to hire me in a big company? So I wanted to be able to kind of build my brand by having long form discussions so people knew who they were going to work with. And I was going to do that by interviewing people in my West Point network. So I launched a podcast called Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews, where you feature winners, people that are, former professional athletes, success entrepreneurs, people that are just, I think, really mastering their craft in the industry in a lot of ways. I talk about wallets, personal finance, real estate's been a passion of mine, investment strategies, small business tactics. And then I also talk about worldviews. Something important to me is my faith, but also like the business philosophy that drives a lot of people. And that was a podcast where it was great, and it was learning a lot of different tactics and tools as I was able to share my story. And that was a way I was able to build my personal brand, which mostly contributed to a lot of the followings that I had in these different, or still have, I guess, in these different social media circles. Was the podcast was a way of being discovered, and also sharing my ideas and examples with other people as well. So that's just something that you can kind of frame up in your mind, I guess, on the idea of personal branding. But I think the question really is, why is this something that someone wants to do, or why is this something that I should do? You're probably, if you're not comfortable on social media, you're not comfortable getting your name out there, what's the real benefit here? So these are a couple of the highlights, but it all kind of comes down to the idea of attention. And about 70% of people are introverts, 30% of people are extroverts. So that means probably about 70% of people aren't huge fans of attention. But in a business space, you really want to be able to cut a little piece of the market so that you're able to communicate your message, so you're able to reach your ideal client or your ideal customer. And in a space right now on social media, it's extremely noisy. I mean, every time I open up my phone, I feel like I'm walking into a crowded room and everybody's screaming at the top of their lungs. And I'm just in like, trying to like pay really close attention. It reminds me of that scene from The Hurt Locker where, they're trying to dismantle this bomb and there's all this chaos and shooting and stuff going around. Every time I go on my phone to try to do something, that's what it's like. And what marketers have figured out is that the game is of attention engineering in a lot of ways. So how can you start to build attention? Well, going back to one of the most natural ways is the connection with people and understanding people. There's studies that show that people on social media that post pictures of faces on their accounts get a lot more engagement and likes because there's biological connection with a face. When you're a child or a baby and the first thing you see is your mother's face, you start, it's ingrained into your psyche, and that's a learned behavior that just goes so deep into the rest of your life. So having, this idea of connecting to humans is something that's very important, something we know a lot about after reflecting on the last 12 months. So taking attention by using your brand is one of the best strategies and getting attention out there. The reason you want attention is because, like I said, you're in this crowded room and you're sitting there trying, picture going into your phone and trying to take a little piece of that attention real estate out so that you have an opportunity to showcase your product or service. So what you can do is the first step is it increases your brand awareness. So this is a kind of the same idea with marketing, but if I want to post a picture of, let's say I sell, I don't know, I'm looking at mugs right here, but whatever your business of choice is, it's one thing to just look at the product and be interested in the thing. But people, as I mentioned, it's biologically driven to like people as well. So people are much more interested in following a story. So you're going to increase awareness by being yourself and following your story because it's much more relatable and it's much more interesting to see how humans behave. Think about movies, think about stories, think about literature and books. Everything is about the human interaction. If I wanted to write an entire book on an inanimate object, it could be quite boring. And I think that's the same way of thinking about how brands that might sell a product just sit there and they market only their product on social media. It's not as well to drive, it doesn't drive attention as well as if you had a spokesperson or an individual that you could start to build a relationship with. Obviously, with increasing brand awareness comes all the follow-ons that happen in the sales funnel, where you can increase leads and you can start to engage with actual humans. So you'll start to see feedback on social media platforms or other marketing channels where you're going to get engagement and you're going to get these different tools to say this person, kind of like a handshake in a meeting, but the digital version of it is engagement with likes and comments and things on your social media. So that's another benefit as you can start to gauge this person's now interested and I can start to warm up this prospect. The audience engagement, as I mentioned, being a person is so much more interesting than being a thing in a lot of ways. So you're going to improve the retention and the followership that you might have on a marketing channel. And then obviously that's going to improve growth. And this last one here is something that I think it's kind of been beaten into the skulls of a lot of people in the marketing space lately is the SEO rankings, because it makes you more findable. It makes you more interesting. So obviously with the presence and following on social media takes a place in the top of Google. I mean, if you Googled my name, for example, a lot of the top things that would come up would be a LinkedIn, it would be an Instagram account, it would be a Facebook account, it would be all these different social media channels. And the social media channels get more popular the more following and the more engagement you have. So you need to rank at the top of Facebook, for example, by having a large following and a lot of interest. And then Facebook will want to rank at the top of Google. And the way most businesses find people is to Google things and search engine optimization. So there's a lot of benefits to building a personal brand to take that piece of attention. You want to be findable, but you also want to be interesting. And you want people to be able to engage with your personality versus just the characteristics of a product or service. I also want to mention too, if anybody's got any questions, I don't know if John mentioned this too, feel free to drop those in the chat or raise your hand. I should be able to see for the most part if anyone's got a question, and you can always interrupt me, John, if somebody is on the line and wants something answered. So I really encourage you to, it'll make this a little more fun and engaging.
Yeah, one other thing, AJ, I did unmute everybody if they want to ask a question or have something to comment on. So you just have to, those listen in just have to unmute themselves and ask away. So
great. Feel free to interrupt me. Like I said, this will be, I think it'll be more fun if it's relevant to your unique situation, and we can always walk through personal examples as well within your business or industry. Okay. So the second thing is, there's kind of a mix of people in here. We've got some people that might work for a company or might be wanting to improve their career or their job. So this is pretty obvious, I think, but it's also worth reiterating that when you're looking to be employed, most people will do some type of social media screen, whether that's formal or informal. If you're looking to hire someone, it would probably behoove you to take a look at their social media channel just to get a glimpse of, I guess, how this person wants to showcase their life. And if you're doing it unintentionally, like most of us do, where you're just posting things that are funny or your personal opinions, and so your Facebook page and everything's just kind of personal, it definitely leaves room for exposure to be looked at negatively. I call it you're on defense automatically versus on offense. If you want to start to build a personal brand, you're basically going on offense. You're telling the world how you want to be portrayed, which will include future employers and different individuals that are screening for candidates. There's another stat I saw. Well, actually, this wasn't a stat. This was a friend of mine that was applying for a job on the West Coast to Amazon. And some of the folks in the hiring process, depending on your position in Amazon, were asking, they required that you showed your website. And a lot of people that were from the Midwest were like, what does that mean? We weren't really taught to have a website. And they said, oh yeah. We want people to have a website with their brand and all their information on it and kind of projects that they've worked on, their personal hobbies, and get to know them. And that was really interesting that Amazon was actually not only, expecting to see people had a website, but almost requiring it so that they could see what people's personal brand was like. So some of these large companies are even going as far as wanting individuals that understand this kind of practice so that they can continue to carry themselves on social media. Obviously, with the idea of looking favorably towards employers, the average person switches a job every 2 to 3 years. So maintaining that, offensive approach to how you're portrayed on social media at least gives you the opportunity to share with others what you want them to see versus them just seeing how you kind of behave and things you're interested in. So this is definitely something that benefits people looking to kind of climb that corporate ladder and looking to build their personal brand. Obviously, with the launch and the explosion of the platform LinkedIn, this has been kind of the strategy most people will take on with that platform specifically. The second, group of people this pertains to, I think, quite significantly, is entrepreneurs or small business owners. There's a lot of leverage that can be created as an entrepreneur for a fraction of the time. This is one of the cheapest ways to buy attention real estate in today's market. I mean, we yesterday at the Venture Project we just decided we were going to do we call it a weekly rundown. We're just going to have a podcast, 30 minutes, have a member on every week, feature them and talk about it. And in 30 minutes, we got, we're closing down on almost 1,000 views on Facebook with just that one video. I'm not that impressed with 1,000 views, but the point is that what if I wanted to go to 1,000 doors, door to door, or what if I wanted to go to find 1,000 people that are going to listen to me talk for 30 minutes? It's very difficult to find that on an analog style. So this ability of having a personal brand has a pipeline of an audience on social media that's following you around. I always think of it like kind of like Jesus and his 12 disciples, but on steroids. Like you have this following of a lot of people constantly circulating every time you're able to post something or say something. You've got a stream of people interested in listening and maybe interested in buying. And it's the cheapest this has ever been in history. And it's getting more expensive as these different platforms figure out how to monetize it. But I still think it's significantly undervalued at the moment. So this idea of leveraging what you have to say, being able to say something and having a platform or exposure in a personal brand, you have this captive audience in a lot of ways of people that might be interested in hearing what you have to say. The second is the idea of flexibility. So, a personal brand is a foundation that gives you the ability to launch multiple businesses or hobbies or nonprofits. So if you look at a business brand, like we'll say Coca-Cola or something like that, they're known as kind of a software or a soft drink company. And that is kind of their thing. But if you look at a person, people are much more complex and dynamic and difficult to label than a company or a brand. So you have a lot more flexibility. You could change industries or switch things and find different consistencies and connection points a little easier. So if you have a personal brand, you still have this audience of people to launch. So if you wanted to sell soft drinks one day, but then you decided you wanted to sell, insurance the next, it's not very difficult to make that transition. So having a personal brand as an entrepreneur gives you flexibility within your product market. If you had an Instagram page of all soft drinks and then you wanted to just pivot one day, it would be very difficult. But if your Instagram page was about you and you talk about your story and you've kind of warmed people up to this new transition that you're going through in life or whatever, it becomes a lot more common and easy to understand why you switch industries and pivot and quickly change. So it offers a lot of flexibility for someone that's interested in changing and pivoting in their business strategy. And then this last piece, I call it an insurance policy because, businesses can kind of go belly up, but if you ever notice how businesses can go bankrupt, but individuals can still stay on top. I mean, if you think of back in the 90s with Donald Trump's bankruptcy, he had the name Donald Trump. So he was able to come back from that. You had 50 Cent go bankrupt recently, and he came back because his name is 50 Cent, or Johnny Depp. These are individuals that have built up a personal brand, and it's acted as insurance policy in a way because they have established influence and following in a lot of ways. So that the business can, or that their money or whatever can go under, but because they have a reputation that they know they can market another thing, 50 Cent was able to come back with vitamin water, right? So it's just like the idea of a product or a business can be pivoted very quickly when you have that brand, that name, that following of people that are interested in you and not necessarily the business. So I call it kind of an insurance policy of sorts. So as long as you can stay consistent and true to your values, it really becomes the greatest insurance policy of all time. I think the biggest issue people have is when they do things contrary to their value, and it has an inverse effect of extreme negativity. Some people say that there's no such thing as bad publicity, but obviously when things are attacked against character and other things, it becomes very difficult. Okay, so I got a question here. So I was referring to the podcast that I did for members, and I also do that at the Venture Project. How do you become a member and what's the cost? So as I was talking a little bit about the podcast and the ability to tell your story, one thing I'm very passionate about and believe in is allowing entrepreneurs or business owners or people trying to build up that personal brand to offer that on a verbal scale. So podcasting is replacing radio in a lot of ways. So the Venture Project, we built a studio right here where we can have up to 6 people at a time pretty comfortably to be able to record podcasts, YouTube videos of that sort. So we offer that to members at a discount rate. And we also offer it to the public at a standard rate. So it's $50 an hour to get the studio time to the public. If you're a member at our entry level member point, it's $47 a month just to get access to the entire building, the Venture Project. And then it's discounted to $25 an hour. If you are a scaling business member where you get a cubicle and your name on it, and then you get 2 hours of podcast time and some other credits to the other rooms. And then obviously if you have an office here, you get 4 hours to the podcast room. So we have several podcasters in the studio. We help people out, produce it, get started. And podcasting is pretty low barrier to entry, but I'm pretty passionate about sharing your story. And it's been beneficial to me, as I've kind of mentioned, of building a brand and being able to do that. So if you want to become a member, all you got to do is stop by 210 North Main Street, shoot me a note after this, and we'll get you set up squared away. If you want to start a podcast, maybe you're in a former life, you were one thing, you might have some insider information to share with people. Maybe you're on a curious experiment journey and you want to learn things from others and interview. It's just a fantastic platform that I believe is a great way to help network. Number one, you get 2 people in a room that have a great conversation afterwards so that they never would have been interested in talking to you, but because you have a platform to share their story with, they're interested. Number 2, a way of kind of building, a relationship with your following. So podcasting, to answer your question, Greg, is one of those different strategies that I've employed and also found a lot of benefit to. So that's a little example, I guess, for entrepreneurs. Once again, guys, you got questions, shoot me a note and I'll see if we can answer them. So the second thing that a personal brand can do in a lot of ways is create authority. So there's a book written several years back in the 80s. So if you're a sales professional, I encourage you to check it out, or any kind of leadership role where building influence is important. It was a book by, I believe his name's pronounced Robert Cialdini, and it's the book called Influence. And he goes through several cognitive biases that what make influence people in sales roles, and influence them to purchase or influence them to do what they do. And one of the 6 tenets is the principle of authority. And the principle of authority is having some kind of credentials or background that make you worth listening to and make you valuable. So having a personal brand in a lot of ways is a way of building up your resume with your audience for a long term. You can start to say things, you have an opportunity to share, your hard credentials and your soft credentials. People can decide if they want to agree with you. But obviously, as you start to get a large following, there's another influence principle called social proof that, is the cognitive bias that if you have a large amount of people that are interested in this, that it must be right. It's obviously a logical fallacy, but it's a cognitive bias. So you see this in marketing all the time. Verizon, the nation's number one or largest network, just because so many people are on it, this must be good. Everybody's doing it, so it must make sense. So you have these ideas of these influence tactics that you can use when you have a personal brand. You have the opportunity to showcase your credentials long-term, which gives you a position of authority. You also have a lot of followership, which gives people the impression that you might have something interesting to say. So I'll actually spend maybe more than 30 seconds listening to this video or whatever. So that's another serious benefit to this. So why is this beneficial? So, one of the things this does is it starts to, as I kind of mentioned, builds trust. So people trust each other after they get to know them for quite a while. Now, it's difficult to build trust with a product. You can certainly do that, and that's kind of the old school marketing tactics, but it's a lot easier to understand someone's values, where someone's coming from, if I like this person. And those are a lot of things that help build familiarity. So what builds trust is familiarity, a platform of value, showing that you're giving something to them, that they're getting something out of the conversation. I mean, think about your friendships. Most of your friendships or usually have some kind of exchange of value. A relationship in a lot of ways is the definition of being reciprocal, having reciprocity. You're giving somebody joy, happiness, a shoulder to cry on, advice, tips and tactics, fun, a great time if you're the guy that goes to the bars or whatever. It's the idea of exchanging value for one another consistently over time that becomes the idea of a relationship. And if you can do the same thing with a brand where you're showcasing value to someone, whether you're offering them entertainment, whether you're offering them humor, whether you're offering them education, tips, tactics, whatever that is in your personal brand genre, you're showing value to someone, they're going to want to exchange that value back with you, and you're going to start to build a relationship. And the other thing is it shows people authenticity. When you start to record your life, it becomes very difficult to hide your flaws. So people are going to look for that, and they're going to start to understand you as a human. So this is really a huge benefit to going deeper. So then when you do decide to market a product, they say, well, I trust the leadership. I trust the person that's selling it. I trust the employee that's working. You have an opportunity to showcase trust with someone before they even meet you, which is the idea of a psychological influence principle, as well as priming, where you're able to actually prime people into trusting you before you get to really know them in person. You're able to showcase that with your personal brand. So the second reason this works is the idea of storytelling. This goes really deep. I mean, if you think of literally the oldest stories we know, biblical times, I mean, this is something that's ingrained into us, is the idea of a story. And there's a lot of psychological value to the idea of storytelling, and story selling, as marketers would start to say it. In fact, almost all marketing is done in a way of a story. There's a couple of fun stats here, like the average attention span of adults, 7 to 12 seconds. I probably lost you guys, 35 minutes ago, if that's one of you. But the idea is that having a story keeps things engaging. Telling stories is one of the best things that you can do to try to connect people in, because they can start to relate. They can vicariously step into these stories. And our brain, that's what they remember, emotions and stories. They don't necessarily remember facts. And you'll just start to remember things. And finally, this last piece is that content is king. Having as many stories out there and having as much content on the social media and digital platforms and personal branding platforms. Social media is just one way of doing it, but there's many others of building a personal brand. I mean, Stephen King is almost a ghost on social media, but obviously you know him from his writings, his books, and his movies because he's established that personal brand. But the idea is that the content is still there. He has decided to write books. He consistently writes books. He's consistently promoting his books. Content on social media, as well as having that story constantly funneled, is going to start to build the reputation that you are, trying to build with your audience. So for whatever reason, our brains remember stories and the expressions much more than facts and data. And these stories can build credibility, and they can also be entertaining and fun. So by doing this, by creating this relatable personal life and personality, you can start to build a relationship. So I'm going to give you a couple tips here on how to get started. This is a great slide. If you're looking for what should my personal brand say or do, and this is the trifecta that I think works the best. You have your strengths, what the world needs, and your personal passions. You're trying to find that value proposition in the middle of all of them. So, I mean, there's definitely lots of examples we can think of like your strength and what the world needs. This is where a lot of people find themselves in a career that they don't necessarily enjoy or find fulfilling. So like this is, if you're the person that punches numbers on a keyboard and you're great at it, and clearly that's very valuable to a company, but it's not fun. That's kind of where you fall into that left quadrant, or that left little bubble overlap. Things that you're good at and are fulfilling, these oftentimes become like hobbies. I think this is kind of how I am I play guitar. We play in our church band, and it's fun, but I'm clearly not really that great. Like it's not super marketable, or it's extremely competitive to where like I can't quite get there. Or like, I don't know, maybe you have a hobby that just isn't necessarily that marketable. That's kind of where you're in that space. And then there's finally this bottom one, things that are marketable and fulfilling, but you're not very good at it. This is where you fall into the starving artist kind of category, where your paintings are no good. And, your family tries to kind of be like, hey, maybe you should try something different. And then you end up just in a space where no one wants to buy your work because you're not very good at it, but it's marketable if it was at the right strength level. So that's why focusing on your strengths, every great book that I've read in business or in personal growth and development is usually centered around building on someone's strengths. And I think that's a great place to start is, what are you great at? What does the world need? And what's something that really fires you up and makes you feel great when you're doing it? The second thing to do to get started is to press record. So we've got social media, we've got a phone in your pocket. This is really easy to start telling the story. So, you can start to introduce the characters of your life. If you're comfortable with you've made the decision, you're ready to press record, telling the story of, your family, your characters, kind of what genre that you want to, what kind of characters you want to introduce. If you're an employee, this might be, the time to kind of introduce your company, as it could be a character in this. You could be the character in this. Your coworkers could be characters. If you're an entrepreneur, this could be kind of like your family, your kids, your coworkers, different vendors. You want to start to introduce these different characters into the story, because with characters is going to come issues, which is going to be your conflict. And every good story follows this rhythm: characters, conflict, conclusion. So you want to start to let people get to know you as a character, but also other characters, and you want to share the conflict. There's a story when we did a video a couple months ago. We were raising money for a fundraiser, and I brought one of my videographers with me, and I told him, look, I want you to document all the conflict, because that's something that you never see on social media, and that's what keeps people engaged. So we had we were pulling a boat to go up to the Mississippi River to play music and raise money for charity. And when we were pulling the boat, one of the wheels fell off the axle, and we were scraping sparks down the highway in the middle of a highway in La Crosse, Wisconsin. And I was like all stressed out. I jump out of the car. The cops come, the tire rolls into somebody else's car, all this stuff. And I'm literally standing out there with a cop. I'm like, not sure if I'm going to get in trouble or what's going to happen. And he comes over with a video, and he's just like right in my face. He's like, what's going on in your mind right now? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this couldn't be worse timing, but yes, I need you to document this. This is conflict, right? And then it made the video so much better at the end when you're able to share those moments of conflict, because it keeps people engaged. Like, well, what's going to happen next? How is he going to get out of this one? And like normal life things, you always solve the problem. But it's not interesting to the audience if they don't, see the conflict and then you solve the problem. And then you obviously the solving the problem is the conclusion. So having this rhythm of storytelling and starting to introduce your characters, your conflict, your conclusion. If you're a blogger, if you're a writer, if you're a podcaster, having different guests on, these are characters. And then you want to start to figure out what's the problem that you're overcoming. And finally, last one is content. This is something that you just got to continuously push out and keep some kind of rhythm with it. A lot of strategies and tactics that can go with that, but having a consistent rhythm of content is really essential. One of the last things I'll leave you with is kind of how you can figure out that you're being valuable. So this is what I call the 3 W's. So one of, it's after you kind of figure out your passions, you can kind of figure out your strengths, but figuring out what the world needs can be a little different. So I call it the whose problem am I solving? What am I doing or discussing to fix it? And why am I better than somebody else in my market? What's going to give me a sales edge or a competitive edge? So usually when I'm going through a marketing exercise, I have a form like this and I fill this out to where I want to know everything about my ideal client or customer. I want to know what their problems are so that I know that whatever my service is can deliver. And when I work with clients that either come to the venture project, we have several clients come in with different invention ideas. This is usually the framework that we try to figure out, because you can have a great idea, but if it's not solving a problem, it's really not valuable to anybody. So we want to know if this is solving a problem, who exactly is the problem going to be solving, and how is this product or service going to do it the best way possible. So this is a great template you can kind of get a look at. If you want to connect with me afterwards, I can send you this and you can kind of fill it out for yourself. If you're looking at a way of marketing, yourself, your personal brand, even your personal brand, you're going to want to know the genre of person that you're helping and figure out what that kind of, service or entertainment value or education are you going to be able to provide? How are you going to deliver value to someone from a personal brand perspective if you don't go through this? So the last thing is this page. This is kind of fun. I got a QR code. So if you guys hold up your iPhone camera or any camera to this little barcode, it'll take you to my LinkedIn page, and then you can give me a follow, reach out if you have any questions, and we can certainly stay connected. These are some of the different social platforms that I'm prevalent or at least on pretty consistently. You got Instagram, Facebook. My podcast is below Winners, Wallets, and Worldviews. That's my personal website. And if you go on my personal website, one of the tabs, you can see my podcast. One of the other ones is the Venture Project. You should be able to find just about everything out about me off that website. So that's part of the benefit of deciding to do this. But with that, I'll leave it to you guys. If you have any questions or anything, feel free to jump in. If you have a specific example or anything you'd like to know.
Great, AJ. As we mentioned, we have an opportunity for everyone to unmute themselves if they have a question or a comment that they would like to share with the group. Get a discussion going. Again, if you're shy about that, you can use the Q&A tab on the bottom of the page if you'd rather do that sort of thing. So I don't know, AJ, if somebody, they listen to you and it sounds good, how does somebody just get started doing this?
Yeah, and that's what I think the easiest way would be to come right here is just, press record, start introducing characters to your life, to what you're comfortable sharing. I think it takes a definitely discussion with you and your family, decide what level you want people to know about you and understanding what that boundary is. My boundary, obviously I've decided whatever, what's out there is out there. And I think people are going to get to know it one way or another. So you might as well either be on offense or on defense. So if you're on offense, you're kind of telling them, you're setting your brand message. That's a PR strategy too, that a lot of people talk about, but just pressing record, right? Start introducing your characters. If you've got a social media platform, just start using that one, be comfortable with it. And start to engage and put content out there and start to tell your story, but write it out, think about it, just like any other storytelling. What are the characters? What's the conflict going to be? What's the conclusion? How are we going to arrive at that conclusion? How am I part of the hero's journey? The hero has to be part of the conclusion. So how am I solving the problem? And that's some of the pre-work that I would recommend people start doing. Just start feeling it out, get comfortable on the platforms, and go from there.
Okay, any questions, any other thoughts, comments from anybody? Now is the time to do that. It's always hard, social media is so prevalent these days, and getting good information is always a challenge. I mean, whenever I see something or my wife tells me about something, my question is, well, is it true?
Right.
So, that whole issue of trust is and being credible is always a challenge. I mean, are there things that people can do to kind of boost their credibility and become position themselves as a trustworthy source of information?
Absolutely. I think that there's lots of different ways to build credibility. One of them is having well recognized credentials. So if you do have, I call them hard credentials, which is the letters after your name or the degrees and the certifications you can put on your door or whatever. But then there's also soft credentials. These would be, like kind of results that you get in life. I mean, if you have a significant amount of testimonials of 5-star reviews, those are results, and results are a form of credentials. Like, look, my customers think this about what we're doing. I might not have anything behind my name, but this is reality. And in a lot of ways, the scientific method is studying what results happen over time. It's actually more of a fallacy to appeal to authority to say, look, because I've got a fancy degree or this, it means I know something. That's actually less scientific, in my opinion, than somebody that has a significant level of results that have been proven over time. Because in the scientific method, you have the hypothesis, you test the hypothesis in a systematic experiment, which is results that you see. And then eventually with enough results, you deem it as, yeah, this is true. And that's basically what we've arrived at in science and how to get to results and answers. So I think that there's a nice mix of, if you have hard credentials, great, use them. And if you have soft credentials like results or stories, that of success stories, use the mix of both of them to kind of build that credibility you have. I think if you don't have one or the other, it's time to start to get to work and figure out how do you start getting results so you can start telling that story.
AJ, this is Greg again. Can you hear me?
I do. Hi, Greg.
Hey.
Great conversation yesterday, by the way.
Same here. You know the business that I'm in, and what's hard for me in particular to try to figure out is if you are, if you're trying to push your own personal brand, which is what we're talking about here, how does that work when you are in a business that you have to depend on others? For instance, like in my business, if someone is processing with me, it may not be the testimonials I would probably be more about, for instance, customer service and how I treat people with honesty and integrity and all those good things. But the problem then becomes where you, in this business, you have to count on others as well. And you have absolutely no control over, because like the companies that I work with are one's out of Missouri, one's out of Pennsylvania. And, I can't go there and fix the problem that you might have. And so how do you, it's a multifaceted question, I suppose, but how do you fix that when you're personal branding?
Well, I think that's one of the benefits to personal branding is that you can kind of scope the results within your field of control. So like, I guess, for example, with you, we're like, you're kind of developing the business, you're in the sales, you're treating people with honesty and respect, but maybe the merchant service comes out and it's got a clunky software, it's got some bug or issue, and they're upset about the product, but they're very happy with how you were. You can start to build results and testimonials and stories and reviews on how you were. So yeah, there's a disadvantage in, I guess, from working with a big group of people or in a company that your story is tied to the company, but that's kind of the responsibility of the company's brand. Your brand is kind of the highlights and wins that you had. So if you could kind of scope your review system or your credentials to what was in your control, that gives you a lot of flexibility to where, well, I did my job, and it's kind of like in a sport, like if a lineman gets 5 pancakes, but the running back misses the hole, it's like, well, the lineman has his individual personal brand stats. He still gets recruited and plays college football. The running back doesn't, right? So it's kind of thinking about how do you just tell that story around what's within your sphere of influence.
Thank you.
AJ, we had one of the listeners ask if you could advance to the next slide. There it is. Perfect.
There we go.
If Paul had a question around that, or just wanted to take a shot of that.
Yeah, I mean, some of my seminars, we spend a half a day on just this slide alone. We can really go into understanding the problem that you're facing with people. But the big one here is like, whose problem am I solving? Because as you guys know, with the venture project now, especially with some of the publicity we've gotten, a lot of people come in with ideas or business ideas or startup ideas, and they have great ideas. But it's when I start grilling them on whose problem are you solving, they really struggle with that question, because they just had, oh, I don't know, I would use this. I like this idea. I think this invention or product or service is great. But it's like, that doesn't do any good to the market. The market wants to know who am I helping? Like, if you said soccer moms between the ages of 33 to 39 years old that have 2+ kids or more, that becomes a demographic we can really talk to. This is a pain point. But if you're saying like, well, everybody likes this idea, well, that's gonna be very difficult to market to. So another question is who doesn't want this product? That's a great question you can ask. Like, who's this not helpful for? And just start there to start to rule out things like that. So yeah, we could spend a ton of time on this slide alone, but this is a good framework to just understand who you're helping, because everyone says, oh, deliver value, be valuable. It's like, well, okay, how do I be valuable? That's a hard question, because you want to be valuable, you want to improve your business, but if we don't know what problem we're solving, that's not that helpful. So let's figure out the problem and go from there.
Yeah, we run into that all the time. People come in and say they have this, the greatest idea in the world, or they make this great product or have this great service, and you say, well, who's your customer? And that's kind of where it kind of stumbles. And if you're trying to capitalize a new venture, your banker certainly is going to want to know. And
right.
So it's important element of any business plan is people take it from concept to commercializing. So very good stuff. So
exactly.
Okay.
And, people can come, but people are welcome to come into the venture project, and we can discuss this in your case or whatever if you're interested. Like I said, we help businesses of kind of all levels. We focus on small business startups, but if you're looking at, hey, I have a podcast idea, or I want to start figuring out how to build my personal brand, we got in-house photographers, videographers, a studio. We got all the tools here at 210 North Main to kind of help you guys out. So
that's great. Okay, I think we're about towards the end here. If there's any other last questions, ask them now. And it doesn't look like we have any more. So AJ, thank you very much. One of our listeners said, thank you for your service. And, we certainly can concur with that comment. And as always, a great presentation. So thank you for spending some time with us, sharing that. If anybody needs more, wants more, AJ is certainly accessible. So be looking for him over at the Venture Project. This has been recorded. It'll be online probably this afternoon. So with that, again, thank you all for joining us, and we will see you all very soon. Thanks a lot.